Greetings and welcome to another excellent chess video. We're going to do the daily problem, and I'm going to show you tactical patterns that we're going to look for randomly. And this is the key. We're going to look at stuff that people who do pre-programmed lessons, they have a stiffness about them. And one of the reasons why that's the case is because, well, let's just say they do it to make them look better than they actually are. Me, I don't do that because I don't have to. I'm actually as good as I look like I am. Whatever that means to you, it doesn't really matter to me. If you're actually good, you know it. So here's something we can look at. We'll look at different tactical patterns and then decide, is it good for white or good for black? And in the end, we're going to play a game of attrition, and we're going to remove the ones that are bad and leave essentially only the ones that are good, depending on what those are. Process of elimination is what it's called. So the first thing that jumped off the page to me was queen takes g7, check. But you look at this move, he's got a knight defending this. So this knight on e8 defends this. It might not be that great. The thing is also, we're going to use my dad's rule number 2. What's he trying to do to me? Well, white is attacking down the g file against g7 with this bishop. So black correctly should be thinking trading queens to reduce the ability of this attack. But there's another thing we have as a possibility, and that is we could trade queens. We could play, you'll notice that if we play queen takes queen on a5, knight takes queen. What if we kill this knight? Well, if we play bishop takes knight, and he plays rook takes bishop, which is a mistake, we would just play queen takes queen and win his queen. So you got to look at moves, counter moves, good moves, bad moves. And you have to be able to identify what defines a bad move. Now, bishop takes knight, question mark, is not the best move. And I feel this with my spidey senses. I see things that you're not seeing yet. It's okay. I'm just going to add this. Bishop takes knight, question mark, no good. The move rook takes bishop is not the correct move. Black should play queen takes queen. And then if white plays rook takes queen, then rook takes bishop, and you've averted a huge catastrophe. Now, there's another thing. One of the things that I talk about in other videos is what I call the X+1, technique. And what that means is we look at a combination, and then we tend to stop before the combination is fully divulged. This is a natural error in thinking that all players do, grandmasters included. It happens to everybody. There's nothing you can do to stop it. You just want to be aware of it and reduce its impact and opportunity. So when I looked at this move, queen takes pawn check, he's got it defended by the king and the knight on g7. Queen takes check, knight takes. Well, I could play bishop takes knight, or I could play rook takes knight check. And now this rook takes knight check starts looking good because we have something else that's developed. When I showed you originally, it was queen takes pawn, knight takes queen. This is looking 2 moves deep, or x equals 2. So with the X+1 technique, we want to go, well, we look 2 moves deep, let's look 3. When I say moves, I mean piece movements. 1 move for each black and white. Queen takes pawn check, knight takes queen, 1, 2, and now it's X+1, 3. What's the third move? Well, bishop takes pawn, it's not really threatening anything. Rook takes pawn check, guarded by the bishop, threatens the king. The king has to move. The knight's already dead. King to h8. Now what you have in this position here is something called the windmill. And the windmill is when you move a piece repeatedly for discovered check by this piece. Now the problem we have, if we play this windmill check here, is if we move to say rook to g5, discovered check from the bishop, he's just going to play knight takes bishop to avert checkmate. Then we could play like rook takes queen. This is not the best sequence. I already know this. And this comes from years of practice and other studies that you're not seeing. But I'm giving you the shorter version. But this is very close. In fact, we're going to play this move to get to this position so you can see this for yourself. I'm seeing this all up in here in the chess brain. You're looking at it in a static position, much more difficult. This is the correct move, so is this. This is what I saw way back here, plus more. Now, I have 55 years of chess playing experience, and I'm a master player. I can see this easier than a lower ranked player, someone who's like 1200, for example. So this is the position that I was looking at in my chess brain. And I can't move this rook to, like I said, I can't play this move, rook g5. He would just play knight takes, rook takes queen, and then knight takes free bishop here. And he'd have bishop, knight, rook, and rook against rook and rook and knight. He'd be a piece ahead. We're losing. Let me run this for you again. Rook to g5, discover check from the bishop, which would be checkmate, except he can just take the bishop. He can play f6 if he wants to, but knight takes bishop. Rook takes queen. Knight takes bishop on d3. This leaves white with only 2 rooks and a knight. Black will have 2 rooks, a bishop, and a knight. And he's winning. So this combo setting up this windmill, king to h8, is winning for white. You saw it because it's showing you here. The key thing is, now I can move this rook to g5, for example, and check with the bishop attacking a higher value target. There's one other thing I can do, and this is the key thing about windmills. Windmills also contain inside of the formation the opportunity to double check the enemy king. Now, ask yourself, okay, well, maybe this is new to you. You're like, okay, I never really learned much about windmills specifically as a lesson. You might have seen a problem or whatever and seen a solution and go, oh, that's interesting, but you didn't really study it. So the only other place we can make a check that's a double check is rook to g8 double check. Now, the smart guy would say, well, what does that do? Well, the thing is, by rule, only the king can only move. So the only response to rook to g8 check is king takes rook. But this is the key, that if we do that, this is what is known as a clearance sacrifice. We're clearing the diagonal for the bishop to own the h8 square, which is very bizarre because normally that's not the square you want to own an intermediate square to move or check or what have you. But we want to control this square because if we go rook to g8 double check, king takes rook, it's forced. The winning move here is rook to g1 check. Why? This is an unstoppable checkmate. It's an unblockable file. And the bishop owns the corner square because when this rook is gone, this bishop on b2 takes command of the h8 square, but he couldn't take the bishop with the knight because the rook is also checking him. So here, what you're seeing is you're learning the intricacies of the windmill, which is the rook and bishop combination against the king. So rook checks, king takes, rook g1 check, queen can play to g5, but then rook takes queen, and it's checkmate. There's nothing he can do. All right? And this is the checkmate that I saw deep in my mind. Okay, now let's go back. Okay, so we saw a vicious combination of pieces attacking the g7 square, queen, rook, and bishop. And due to the different variables that happen, we're going to sacrifice a rook and get this other rook in on this. So essentially, it's going to be 4 pieces at some point attacking the G7 square. This is a very unique way, but again, I looked at the first thing I showed you was with queen takes pawn checkmate, but knight takes queen. Most players have been taught by whoever taught you chess, a relative, a friend, that, well, he's going to be giving up a $3 knight for a $9 or $10 queen, depending. Some say 9 for the queen, some say 10, whatever, tomato, tomato. And you go, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I want to sacrifice my most powerful piece, except in the case when it's actually forcing a checkmate, which this does. And so we looked at this. I take your pawn, you take my queen. That looks terrible. So you're like, no, cut it off. We looked X moves deep, which was 2. Well, go X plus 1. We look at a third move. What's the best third move? Takes with check. Knight takes. Bishop takes is inferior. Bishop takes knight is inferior because you're not forcing the situation. Rook takes is the classic windmill because we're going to be moving, we're threatening to move this rook with check for convenience for us, not somebody else. And the move that wins in different windmills can be different. Sometimes you have to play rook takes, the rook pawn, white or black. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to give you like rook takes h7 because if the colors are reversed, well then rook takes the rook pawn by the king is the. Sometimes this is the move. Sometimes rook takes the bishop's pawn is the move. Sometimes it's just rook moves away like rook to g5 just to attack a higher value piece and just walk away with the win in that regard. But in this case, this knight killing this bishop is really powerful. So we want to thwart him. And that was the other sacrifice idea is the double check. So we played the double check, which is this absolutely killer. Rook comes over here to g1, and now it's finishing time because this is the combination of unblockable diagonal with unblockable file. And one of the things that's interesting, you almost never hear anyone use the terms that I use, which makes chess learning difficult online. Because just because you're a good player or a really good player, that does not confer instantaneously the ability to really teach people well. I'm great at teaching things. And I've always been great at teaching things since I was a kid because I understood the things intricately, and this helps. You got to know why. Like I said, I saw all this and I told you in advance. These problems, you get one shot at it. You can't do it again. You can't take your moves back. I mean, it does do a thing where it takes it back. But you see, I didn't do that. I didn't make a mistake. Why? Not my hat. It's what I call the chess brain. Now, I use the chess eye to see the moves. And so my chess eye spotted the moves relatively quickly. But the chess eye can be fooled. The chess brain, not so much. That's the key. We want to use our chess eye to alert us to opportunities, but use your brain to figure it out, which is what I did here. So, like I said, this is a classic windmill. And you learned all the major elements of the windmill. It's a bishop and a rook combining on either g2, g7, b2, b7. You could theoretically have it in other square configurations, but these are where it normally happens is the knight files, all right? The B and the G files. So hope you learned something helpful about windmills. There's a lot of different ones, and they're kind of difficult because they have a lot of move options, which you saw here. So I want to thank you guys for watching the video. Tell your friends. This will help them improve. And then, like I said, I use phrases that people don't use very often because they don't really understand how to effectively teach someone who isn't as good as they are something to be now extremely good at this item. A 5-year-old child would do quite well in a windmill. Now, there's some things that are a little more complicated than a 5-year-old would get, but he'd get a lot of this, or she would get a lot of this early on. We don't want to assume they're not good. We want to assume that they're good if we teach them correctly. This is the key. So hopefully you learned something here. Spread the word. Come and check out my other videos. I have plenty more videos of how my father taught me. And that's how I got to be so good at explaining things, because my dad explained it to me, because my dad was a college professor and he was great at explaining. How do you know? Look at me. Look what I do. I make this look easy. And that's the key. So thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you on one of my other videos. And as always, like and subscribe.